Creativity is essentially intelligence having fun. I built an entire rhyming scheme around Baba. Baba the barber, person who cuts your hair, Baba the father. My name is John Akello. I'm a creative technologist. I'm an author. I'm a speaker and a teacher, but I do consider myself an intern of life. I'm perpetually curious. I'm always inquisitive. I always want to have a learner's mindset, not limiting myself to considering the fact that I'm learned, but by being perpetually curious and seeking knowledge, you have a learner's mindset, which I believe perpetuates through somebody's lifetime. But beyond that, I've been in the creative and marketing industry for about 14 years now, delving in both ideation, design, user experience, and then also development. So it's been quite an eclectic career. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend the rest of its life feeling that it's inadequate. I want to set up an innovation center. And this is a lifelong dream I've had, where I'd get the less privileged people in society, upskill them, reacquaint them back into society. You're an amazing artist, you're an amazing painter, you're an amazing, let's even say musician. But your art takes so long that by the time it's out, how much do you charge for it? Language has the capacity to create or destroy a reality. I'll be big in Japan, so many pants, too many pants, catching them bands, so many fans. I'll be flowing with the essence, you can call me flow essence, shining so bright just like the flow essence. I'll be big in Japan, so many pants, too many pants, catching them bands, so many fans. I'll be flowing with the essence, you can call me flow essence, shining so bright just like the flow essence. I'll be in the kitchen, I got many pans, big time flow, call me big pan.
What is creativity?
So from my perspective, I look at creativity from a perspective of intelligence having fun. Now, interestingly enough, how I look at intelligence is very different from how traditional education systems look at intelligence. I look at intelligence as a collection or an amalgamation of 8 different forms or facets of intelligence. Now, out of curiosity, I know by now you've already previewed some of them.
I can tell you.
You
I
can
can
tell
shine
me.
on people.
Good. But most people don't know.
Yeah.
And what tends to happen is most education systems rely on 2 forms of intelligence, which is logic and language. So you can find somebody strong in the remaining 6, which was in my case when we went to school. I really struggled, but it's because I was stronger in the remaining 6 than what the information was being presented as. So this led to the age-old dilemma that Einstein brought. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend the rest of its life feeling that it's inadequate. So how I look at creativity is, first of all, coming up and understanding the facets of intelligence that you are strong at out of the 8, and then adding a layer of fun to be able to create novelty, to create uniqueness out of this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure by this point, people are curious what the remaining 6 are.
Let me tell you, you're going to enjoy the conversation because John has written a book on creative thinking, and we're going to delve through into those 8 types of intelligence. I knew 2, by the way. When he asked me that question, how many types of intelligence do you know? I knew emotional and logical.
Yes.
The rest, we met along the way. But remember, this What's on Your Shelf is brought to you courtesy of Nuria Bookstore, who is our partner on this podcast, and also the Kenya National Library Service, who are helping you and I get to interact with this world of books and also just share knowledge and share experiences. And today we are privileged to have John, who is a creative thinker, and we'll talk about very many things. He has a book which we'll talk about, where we'll delve into the 8 facets of intelligence, but that is at a later point of this podcast. But John, from where you are, just take us through your journey of innovation and technology.
I've been a very inquisitive and curious person. So even from my childhood, I would always be very interested in finding out how things work. So just breaking things apart. And I think that's my talent. I love the sequence. And you can see there I have 3 very critical books. Tell me how, tell me why, and tell me who. So that's actually my sequence of innovation, just figuring out how things work. Yeah. So anytime something would be spoiled, be it a radio, I'd always be keen on breaking it apart. So actually my passion was to become an engineer, but I didn't get the clusters to meet engineer. Kiswahili iliniangusha, but it's okay. Yes, it's what dropped down my grade,
engineer,
but it's fine.
Kiswahili?
No, the average grade came down.
Ndio wanatupiga Kiswahili, wanasema building itaisha next week.
But it's fine. So my original passion was to do mechatronic engineering, but luckily enough, I was also very good with computers. So that's how I ended up in the computer side. Now, when I got there, I came across some really brilliant guys, especially in the marketing side, and they taught me the ins and outs of how to design. And for me, that became a very visual outlet for some of the stuff that I've been able to do and understanding the fundamentals of design. And that's what got me actually into the innovation and creative space. But in addition to that, I was a very good programmer. So these are two very distinct roles. Programming and coding, and then design. So I was able to develop both of them and nurture both of them simultaneously. And that's what enabled me to delve or be able to harmoniously transition between the design side of things and the user experience side of things and the actual technological side of things. So for me, that's why I consider myself a creative technologist. It's a marriage or a union between the two, where for me, I see them as a tool, not as an identity. So I use them as a tool of expression that I can use technology to solve problems creatively. And that was the introduction to how I eventually ended up in the innovation space.
You've also gotten yourself into VR and AR. And
Yes.
What motivated you to now go that side?
So I've always been in this world of immersion through video games and multidimensional media. And so 3D was a very big part of my world, especially back in the day, the Need for Speed games and whatnot. So I was always curious, how do these guys make this stuff? So of course, now with VR, I came across the experience first with augmented reality, which is basically creating the presence of a three-dimensional object seem like it exists in our space, but it doesn't. So this cushion wouldn't be there, but I'd be able to visualize it to make it seem like it's here. So again, I asked, how do these guys do it? So I ended up learning 3D modeling. I ended up learning spatial layout, lighting, and whatnot in the 3D space. And then now with the programming background, it helped. So I also learned how to do 3D programming. Did a few projects here and there. The viability was interesting, but of course, it came with a very interesting cost implication because the renderers will charge you per second or how long it takes to make a model. So it was quite a costly venture, but it was a very interesting one because it, again, opened my capacity to what is capable with technology. And again, as I emphasize, using technology as an expressive medium for my creativity. So that's how we ended up doing the augmented reality. Then later on, I think in about 2016, my wife got me a set of VR headsets. So I delved into that again. The concept is the same. Can you create a 3D scene and then can you import it into and program it and create an immersive layout for virtual reality? I did a few projects with that, but never delved too much into it. But it's something I want to continue later on in my future because it's very massive.
When you're looking at VR and AR and you're looking at Kenya, how far or how close are we to just starting to appreciate and find normal usage of this kind of technologies?
I'd say at this point in time, the take-up is really good. Maybe, and the thing about creativity at times is timing is everything. I think maybe when we initially started out the VR, AR concepts, they were a bit too far-fetched, right? So I think the timing is right for Kenya right now. The price of a lot of the stuff, the equipment has significantly gone down. It's more affordable. Phones have become more powerful. Because back then, the phones that could run some of those apps were quite expensive. So it wasn't a mass.
What was your first phone?
First phone.
The one you owned, yes. This now was
I think it was a Samsung. Was it the N700? If I'm not wrong, it was one of those old not the touchpad. It was the button based. And it was an amazing phone. Actually, for me, the biggest thing about phones I tend to look out for is the camera. That was it was a really, really good phone for back then. Yeah. And of course, it had an issue. I eventually ended up having a Motorola and then an Ideation. And then I shifted over now to Samsung, the high-end Samsung phones.
My first phone was a Motorola C113.
I think that's the Motorola.
You use it as a mouse at some point.
The round one with the blue lights.
Yes, mine had a red light.
Yes, I think that's the one I got after my Samsung had it.
But interestingly enough, there is so much technology that has happened in the last couple of years. What was your first phone? What was your first phone? And what do you remember most about that phone that you had as your very first phone? So John, your philosophy is that you are an intern for life.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
So there's a very interesting thing. So I got my first internship in 2010. And that was mind-opening for me because I realized everybody else is sort of a master at what they do. But the intern is a person who is always sent around. So you're anonymous, but the beauty of being an intern is you have access to places that you wouldn't be able to get access to otherwise. So I'd be sent, take this file to the boardroom, and then I'd be told from there, get access, send this to the MD, and I have a conversation just out of curiosity. Ask, so what do you do? And it's such a I'd say it's such a, the word I'm looking for is a naive question that somebody would actually explain to you in depth. Like as you say, I was asking your crew, what does this do? And that's how I look at life.
Yeah.
And it's a very humbling thing because it acknowledges that, yes, you might be a master in something, but you'll always be a novice at something else. So it'll always enable you to fill that gap very quickly by humbling yourself enough to acknowledge that I do not know.
Yeah.
And I am willing to learn. And that keeps you perpetually learning. But the beauty of what having that state of mind does is it's the point in time, I think it's one of the points in time where I absorbed the greatest information I have ever absorbed. So again, I was talking to your crew about whether they use Premiere or After Effects. I remember one of the greatest videographers is called Timothy Karanja. I don't know if you know him. He taught me After Effects and Premiere Pro. He then taught me, was it audio? The one used for audio. He taught me something else. Then I learned 3D modeling from one of the guys as well. That's where it actually all started in my internship. So I learned Cinema 4D. I learned how to use Blender. That's why I learned how to use Photoshop. I learned how to use Illustrator, all in a span of 3 months. And I was like, I would love to take this knowledge acquisition or knowledge absorption capacity through the rest of my life. And it's because of that instance of being an intern. I would walk into rooms and there's also a beauty to it. You're not much of a threat to anyone's career. So somebody is willing to share info with you. So that's the philosophy behind the intern of life. Perpetually curious. Because again, if you're not learning, things are changing every other day.
Yeah.
Again, as you've mentioned with phones, the person who came up with that Motorola at the time, it was the greatest innovation of it. But you show somebody that phone right now, they'll be like, what is this? Right? The phone, I think that I really loved the Samsung S6. If you compare the specs of the S6 right now versus an entry-level phone, it's night and day difference. And that's what learning enables you to do. You can catch up very quickly and you're not left too far behind.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why for me, that state of mind of being perpetually curious and perpetually inquisitive, it's only an intern who has that capacity to do that. And that's why I consider myself the intern of life. Life is my school. It's my classroom, it's my playground, and I can learn as much as possible out of it. And for me, there's no limit to what I can learn. And what I'm learning is not necessarily niche specific. And how I tend to do the learning process is I always do my SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And anytime I see an opportunity, I didn't know how to use AR, it wasn't a limiting factor. I learned how to do 3D, I learned how to program in 3D. And then I also look at the threats. Where am I weak at? And what do I need to do to complement that gap? And that's been the mindset ever since.
Wow.
Yes.
So I want to transition to the core thing that brings us to you, John.
Okay.
Your shelf.
Yes.
So give us a quick rough overview of your shelf.
So I have a very eclectic shelf, and this is a small snippet of it. Part of the books I sold quite a number of books. I think it was in 2022, and that transitioned over to audiobook, where I think my library has well over 200 audiobooks there. But I've slowly come back to the physical copies. I'm a very physical person, so I love the feel of the paper, the smell of it, the sound the pages make when they turn. And as you can see, it's a very diverse, eclectic collection. There's some things, and again, it goes back to what knowledge don't I have. So again, I am a mechanic too, so I have my car's vehicle repair manual there. I'm very keen on the fundamental aspects of economics and understanding how global trade and international trade works. So I have something on economics there. I have books on culture, and currently what I'm doing right now is I'm doing a flow of, I want to read the next 100 books written by African authors. So far I'm at 26. So there's a section there that's fully African, specifically Kenyan authors. Then I have some biographies. One of the books I'm reading currently, my current read is Titan. It's a biography of John D. Rockefeller. If you know who he was historically and what he was able to do, I really admire his thinking. He was a very tight-lipped person, very efficient. And That is the code I live by. It's all about efficiency and maximization of output. And he had mastered that to the core, becoming the wealthiest person in history without internet, without any form of communication, and using a ledger to keep track of Standard Oil, which was the biggest oil producer at the time. That for me is just mind-blowing. The people who today even use technology can't reach his level of efficiency with all the technology in the world, right? So there's that side. And then, of course, there's a lot of just figuring out how life is. I'm interested in camping. So recently I got the Camping Bible, went through that, but also just understanding issues of finance. I have a lot of finance books there, one of them being Tony Robbins' Money. This for me was a very big game changer. In that, money, yes, that one by Tony Robbins, and it was a very big game changer because everybody wants to be a billionaire. But the question he asked a very critical question in the book. It's a thick book. It's about 600-700 pages, but it was worth every page, and it enabled me to really figure out, what do you want in life, right? And what do you need? Because yes, you're on the billions, but what will you do with them? Is it for accumulation's sake? What is the purpose? You have to give your money a purpose. And by going through that book, that number significantly dropped. And I can still get the same quality of life I'd wanted to get.
Did you ever answer that question? What do you want to do with the money?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you want to do with the money?
So for me, the way I look at money is a tool. It's a facilitator. And one of the quotes I mentioned is, if you truly want to get to know somebody, show them money. The presence or absence of money truly reveals who a person is. So the presence of money reveals who you are to others. The absence of money reveals who others are to you, right? So by knowing what I need to do with this money, my money goal is calculated in three parts. One is to enable financial freedom. Stop paying rent, have your own space. Second aspect is, can you reach your life's aspirations with the third. And the third aspect is legacy and extension. Do I have a compounding investment plan that will enable my money to sustain me without having to work the rest of my life? So that is my trifecta of how I'm going to use my money.
Yeah.
Right. And that book really helped me answer that. But it showed me a way to do it in a way that I do not have to accumulate the billions to get the same quality of life. Because what he asks is, okay, you want to own, I'll take the top three things that especially most men aspire to: fancy sports cars, private jet, and fancy travel, right? So you want to own a private jet. How much is it going to cost you? At the lower side, let's say $65 million to purchase. You have your aviation tax, you have your hangar fees and everything, and you have to pay your pilot and crew every time that ship takes off or that jet takes off. So on average, first year alone, you're going to be 70 million in, but you can charter or hire a plane for a fraction of the price, get the same experience without the logistics and overhead of maintaining that. So that's understanding that how many times are you going to fly with this jet? 12 times a year, but what's your expense? Can you get the same experience at a fraction of the price? Same thing with travel. Do I need to own a private island to be able to experience, again, buying something for 40 million while I can rent out one for maybe $50,000 for a weekend? It's that shift in mindset. Can I get the same quality, which also some of the things I talk about in creative thinking?
Yeah.
Can I get the same experience for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the headache?
Yeah.
Right. So he does that very well in that book. And so basically that's it. It's a very eclectic, but now what I've really shifted to right now is I'm reading a lot of fiction books. So the current book, and this is a very interesting one. It's a very misguided one, where I picked this book, A Guide to the Birds of East Africa. I loved birds. I love avian. It's the one. So I thought I'm going to go through a book about birds. Only to find out it is a fictional story. But it's an amazing, amazing story. I love it so far. And still it explains, it explains a lot about the birds, yes, but through a very interesting and captivating story. And then recently now, I started my fiction story with...
I'm curious to want to know. I'm not...
Yes.
Before you go into that, like even me,
Yes.
I thought I would see images of birds.
Exactly.
Yes, there are images of birds.
Exactly.
How has the author, Nicola Dayson,
Yes.
how has the author used birds in that story?
So what they have done is they've created a story. It's actually like, I'd say, a 4-in-1 story. One, there is a political representation of politicians using birds. So there's a columnist called Mr. Malik. So how he ended up bird watching is he loves this lady called Rose Mbekwa. right? She's a Scottish lady who had formerly been married to a politician, and she came to Kenya and fell in love with the place and picked up a hobby and became a guide. So he loves her. But there's another guy called Harry Khan, and they have a club. It's called the Asanda Club. It was an exclusively Indian club. So they had a bet, because Harry likes Rose and so does Mr. Malik, who would be able to view the most birds within the shortest period of time. And they have a tally every day at 8 p.m. to register who has seen the most birds, so that they can win a waiver as to who is going to go for a ball dance with Rose Mbikwa. So there are all these dynamics, but at the same time, Mr. Malik is a columnist on a Wednesday paper that wasn't performing well, but he's been sending stories about birds. It's called the Black Hawk column. So here he talks about politicians in a way represented through birds, representative. So it's sort of metaphoric representation of different political characters and the political happenings in the world through bird stories. So that's the whole story around this whole, and it's an amazing book. I'm enjoying it so far. Yeah. I read the first 10 pages, I was about to throw it out the window, but it caught me. I was like, wait, this is not a actual literalization of birds. It's actually a fictional story about bird watching and the lovers of birds. I mean, it's really, really good. It's really good.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's my current physical book collection. A lot of the other stuff, I have audiobooks. I have the Robert Greene collection, the 33 Strategies of War, the 48 Laws of Power, the Laws of Human Nature. So audio for me is also another channel that I prefer, because it allows me to do other things. So when I'm fixing the car, I have an audiobook. When I'm washing dishes, I have an audiobook. When I'm doing something that otherwise I wouldn't physically be able to hold a book, I have an audiobook. So that's the other alternative option for me. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So if I'm to say, give me top 3 picks from this shelf.
So from the shelf, I'd say, excluding my book,
excluding your book,
I've reread about 5 times. I'd say number 1 is The Secret. I came across this book in 2008 by Rhonda. That one, yes, The Secret. It's in a bit of a state. I need to take it for rebinding, but I'll read it as is. Hiyo ndio utamu ya kitabu imesomwa vizuri, right? This book, I came across it as a movie in the year 2008, and of course, just trying to figure out life. You've just finished secondary school. You have no idea what you're going to do. And what this book really emphasized is the law of attraction. And for me, I looked at it from both the religious perspective and what the author had represented, how you can attract things into your life. And looking back 14 years over, I'd say I have a list of about 300 things I want to accomplish. Thanks to this book, I think I'm at maybe number 95. I've been able to accomplish a lot of the stuff I'd set out to do. And it's, again, through part of the law of attraction. And it's interesting how this book has really revolutionized my life and how I look at things, and how it really enabled me to, first of all, appreciate who I am, because that's the genesis of attraction. You have to enjoy your own company. You have to be attracted to the person you are before anybody else can embrace that. So this was the starting point for me with regards to like visualization and understanding the concept around the law of attraction.
Your book, which we'll talk about, is so much into intelligence and what happens in that spectrum. And when you're talking about the law of attraction,
yes,
most of the time it has been used very religiously. Let me say in religious circle.
Yes.
And it's about, how do people say it? Proclaiming.
Yes. You have to proclaim it. If you haven't seen it with your mind's eye, it can never become into existence.
How does that, I know both me and you are not neurologists, but how does that work in the brain and in the spiritual, or in the...
I'll speak about it from, it's actually a very beautiful question. I'll speak about it from both perspectives, a scientific perspective and a neurological perspective, right? So thoughts become reality, and a thought is a form of energy. Now, if you look at from the scientific perspective, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but transformed from one form to another, right? You have water. Water in itself is inert when it's still. But when it moves on a turbine, it generates electricity, and that's what's powering the stuff here. So it's been transmuted from one form to another. Now, the other thing I'd talk about is resonance, and I talk about that from an emotional perspective. But resonance is when two waves align together. This could be electrical, magnetic, or whatever, to create some unity, right? So, interesting case in point. As I told you, the genesis of even us meeting, I'd considered partially a law of attraction, because I've been thinking about two very interesting ideas. How can I get more engagement with the book and have podcasters talk about like the book? And then secondly, how can I use music as a unique angle to market my book? And we'll get into the whole story about how I ended up into music, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I'm having a convo with Bennett, and tells me there's this amazing guy. He's going to be He's going to be interviewing Bule. Check out the video. So I check out the video. I'm like, this is amazing. Then I go to your channel, and I'm like, this is a gold mine. And here we are having this conversation. So I sent out a thought. I was like, man, I'd love to do some podcasts. I'd love to get to tell more people about the book, to get up, especially a niche of people who love reading about the book. And again, it's been an interesting event of 3 to 4 weeks, but here we are.
Thank you. And it's really good to hear that feedback. What is your general thought about what's on your shelf?
It's, my goodness. Actually, when you guys leave, I'm going to continue watching, right? This week alone, I think I've watched about 5. I'd watched the one for Mr. Bule, the owner of Noria. So I think so far I'm 6 in. And that's how captivating it is. I'm like, and the beauty of it, especially when you're talking to other authors, you see the creative process. And for me, it's very fascinating. And as I told you, I'd really love to have conversation with other creatives, because you get to appreciate that some of the things you might consider struggles individually, other people are going through them, but you can also see how they've made their breakthroughs and the insights. And one of the things that really, really made me appreciate that book, there was this lady, what was his name? Zoka, the one who was read 821 books. I was like, my goodness, that is a number. Where do you find the time?
Yes.
How do you do that? Because it's an amazing milestone, right? I don't keep track of books. I think I've read very many books, but I don't keep track of how many I've read so far. But just seeing that there's a group of people who, again, you resonate with, who have this passion for reading. Because for me, books are getaways. Every time I open a book, I set a blank stage and build amazing. In fact, the moment I read a book, I rarely watch the movie. I'll be unbelievably disappointed.
Yes.
It's because the pictures and the depictions I create about my representation of the book, the movie doesn't do it justice. And I've realized, of all the books I have read and then watched the movie, I've been gravely disappointed. So for me, it's just first of all, it's acknowledging that there's a group of people who love literature. And then it debunks the myth that Africans, we read, we are very studious and we are very intelligent, right? And then also just to see the creative capacity that a lot of the people have, like France, 18 books, man, big up. That was amazing, right? And still has the zeal to keep on going. So for me, it's a gold mine, and I'm hooked. I have to watch every single episode that you guys have done.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, it's a really amazing content. I really appreciate the effort and the time that you guys are putting in.
And that also gives us a chance to you who's watching us today, of all the episodes that we've had on What's on Your Shelf, which one is your standout? Which one? I wouldn't say, for me, I would be struggling to say which is my favorite, because everybody has brought in something different into the space. But what has been your standout, What's on Your Shelf conversation that you maybe have had a chance to rewatch, or maybe had a chance to share? Because I'm grateful that this space that What's on Your Shelf has created for both of us, for me and my viewers and the people who are following this channel, we're able to share knowledge, and we're able to build a community of people who are inspiring each other through knowledge, through literature. But for a chance to win the book this week, by the way, which has been your standout? What's on your shelf so far? And the first person to get to the comment section and respond to that question wins our book this week. So go down there, type, or tell us which one has been your standout. What's on your shelf? And by the way, feel free to even tell us if there are 3 or 4 or all of them. but at least I'm sure you must have one that is stand out. But just coming back to this thought and just looking at and what you're talking about, the mind is very, it's strange. I feel like there are things you don't know, you've never read, but subconsciously you in having a conversation with somebody, it wakes up certain aspects of your mind that now pushes you into the next couple of thoughts. What am I saying? Most of the people I've had a chance to sit down with on this podcast have triggered a certain element, I would say, of my mind that was dead or was inactive or was not. You know, those ones they used to say, put that behind your mind, at the back of your head. But I think I'm fascinated, and to be very honest, I feel privileged to be able to sit in with beautiful minds week in, week out, from the young to the old, to just talk about these books. And I'm sure if we would delve, I'm avoiding to go into the spiritual aspect of it, not because I have anything against the spiritual conversation, but I know religion, politics,
hot topics.
Those are things you can talk about for 3 hours and not get to a conclusion. So this was your first. So which is your second?
So my second one, I'd say I'll pick Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. So again, as you can see, the thickness of a lot of those other books, finance books, are very thick. I loved the way this story was written, and it was highly recommended. So the beauty of this book, again, it humanizes the process. It talks about Arkad, who was a trader, and he had gone through it all in life, and he had to start again. So he became a scribe. And again, it's positioning. So as a scribe, he got the opportunity now to get different information, but he realized there's a money master who had figured it out. So this gentleman guides him on how to recover first from his life situation and how to budget, but in a very interesting story-like manner. And I'd recommend it for anybody who's starting out, especially if it's your first career, you're just about to start out in life. I'd recommend that as a very good grounding book. The way it explains the story and the simplicity of it, it's not complex. Like Tony Robbins' book, you can get to page 50 and you drop it if you're not technical, because it talks about indices, the S&P, real estate investment trusts, and they're very complex financial concepts. It actually gets easier towards the end. But this is a book because you're reading it as a story. And for me, when I read a story, I embody the character. So I felt the challenges that he was going through, and I was like, okay, it makes sense. And it's a very attainable process. And one of the things it also talks about is appreciating the value of specialization, because a specialist knows where to get things at the lowest value or price, but knows how to maximize, right? It also talks about how to master your craft, know where to get what, know who to sell to, but it's in a very fascinating story.
Now, this is the second book that you've picked that talks about money.
Yes.
What would you say is the hardest or the best lesson that you can share with whoever is viewing as the best money lesson you've ever learned?
So don't let money define you. It's very interesting how, and this is something I learned from my mom. Whether my mom had money or not, you'd never tell. And again, it's, as I told you, it's the ultimate reveal of character. Its presence reveals who you are to others. Its absence reveals others to you. Of course, nobody wants to associate with a broke person, and everybody laughs at the rich man's joke, no matter how dry they are.
Yes.
It's just the human nature. So the better understanding, and for me, it's not an issue of the 90%, actually most of my life, anything that's happening in my life, whether I'm in highs, whether I'm in lows, I never post anything, and I won't reveal it. But being money neutral, I just know it's a tool. I need it to pay my rent, to buy my food, to do whatever, but it doesn't define me. I won't be the kind of person who, when I get $1 billion in my account, the whole world will know about it. I'll still be in my plain jeans and t-shirts. I think the only tutaniuza tu ni magari. I love cars, man. I love cars. In fact, my nephew pointed out to me, the only thing that will uza you is cars.
Yeah. And actually, that was going to be my next question, because I was going to ask you, if today now you would have abundance, what would be that thing that will eat up your money?
So first thing, I'd build a house. And that's what I'm actively figuring out right now, because rent is your biggest expense, if not second biggest expense. So just eliminate that, right? And I have a list of some cars I'd love to restore. I'm not too keen on fancy new cars. I love the process of, I'm a believer of reinstating the soul of things that people have forgotten. So I'm a restorer. I love restoring things, right? So there's a list somewhere. Itakuwa tu mnaona tu spare parts zinaingia. That's where my money will go. But other than that, I'd spend it on travel. One of the other things I really want to do is eventually, with God's blessing, I want to set up an innovation center. And this is a lifelong dream I've had, where I'd get the less privileged people in society, upskill them, reacquaint them back into society, and grant them skills that they would then be able to flourish with. But also, there are these guys you're always seeing have these amazing ideas they come up with, and nobody does anything about them. I want to tap into that and tell them, can we have some sort of partnership agreement where I patent this, where you have like maybe a 60-40 split, and you have the right to buy it back. That's where my money would go. But again, I won't shout about it. I'm not a shouting guy. I'm a very private person, by the way, right? So for me, money is, it's not going to be the end. It's a facilitator, but it's not the end.
But now being a rapper, rap and talking about how will you bridge that? John is a rapper. You can get to experience his music.
Three months old, man. 3 months old. Yeah. But it's fine. So, again, as I told you, for me, it's very good to know who you are and be grounded in who you are. I find that people who all they have to show for is their money have nothing else to show. Have more depth.
Let me interrupt you there.
Yes.
You say something that I think will escape if I don't ask you.
Yes.
Know who you are.
Yes.
A lot of people have been told, find who you are. Find who you are.
Yes.
Find yourself first. How do you find yourself?
So,
where do you start?
I think it's a very altruistic statement. The first step is self-acceptance. I'm never going to be you. I've never been gifted with the gifts that you've been gifted with. So my starting self is, again, emotional intelligence. A very big part I talk about esteem. And the key component of esteem is absolute self-acceptance and acknowledgement. That this is who I am. This is what I've been gifted with. It's never going to change. So the sooner I accept that and be grateful for it, then the true self starts being revealed. Because what I find a lot of people doing is they morph. It's called the chameleon syndrome. You change who you are depending on the environment you're in. But now that I'm with Mike and then when you're here, I am who I am. It's either you accept me the way I am, or you just leave me as you found me. And I'm very okay with that. Right? I'm not going to change because now you want me to start meeting with a group of people that doesn't meet with my value sets. I'll just tell you straight up, I'm not joining that. And take offense if you will, but I'm true to that. Right? And I don't have to change who I am to meet your preferences.
Awesome.
Right? The moment you're at that point in life, and it takes time, because we really, we're social beings. We want to be associated, but you also find there are people like that who you don't. And for me, I tend to attract people who think the same. And for me, my friends are very, and that guy can tell me something, but I'm like, it's so true. And I tell them, thank you. As painful or as whatever, but thank you for being authentic and honest about it. Right? So the moment you holistically accept who you are, finding self becomes very easy. And one of the things I've also come to appreciate about it's a process. Because if you asked me who I was 8 years ago and who I am, I'm John, but I'm very different because it's a journey. I've realized my interests have changed. There are a lot of material things that I wanted these days. I'm very minimalistic. I'm not too keen on material wealth acquisition. For me, it's experiences, right? And so even in that, that's why I'm very keen on doing nature stuff. That's why I ended up studying about camping and all that stuff. So what I wanted, the person I was 5-8 years ago, physically I might be the same, but mentally or internally, I'm different. So it's a continuous journey, right? That you continuously discover who you are, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Continue discovering who you are. What a pointer. So what is your third and final book before you transition to your book?
My third and final book would be Titan.
This one?
This one. It's a thick, heavy book.
These are the books that when I was beginning to read, I was deliberately staying away
Avoiding.
from. Yes.
Yes. Now,
Tell us about Titan.
Titan. This is an enigma of a character I wouldn't even know where to start describing. I look up to this guy, and to an extent, I think I might have been named after him. I think the only difference between our names is Davison and Derek. Right, and I've also done a play. So like you see Akello, so there's something to it. But this is a book about John D. Rockefeller, who was one of the brightest and most brilliant individuals in the history of economy of the world. And it talks about, and you see a lot of things, again, silent money. This guy was very tight-lipped, never spoke much, very private. But he was able to run an empire that at one point controlled 10% of the world's oil production. It was so big that it had to be broken down into 12 subsidiaries, which even made him more money, right? But it's not about the money. It's about the character. It's about his capacity to overcome. It's about his ingenuity. It's about his ability to understand efficiencies and economies of scale. And for him, the smallest thing would make the biggest change. He never used to make big improvements. It was always in the small things. Like, because of the scale of his business, there's one part where he asked somebody to reduce the cost of production of a barrel from $29 to $28.70. But it's only 30 cents. But he's doing 1 million plus barrels a day. Now picture the scale of that translation. That's $300,000 in savings every day. Now that's how that guy saw 1 cent. And everything for him was about numbers. So he was very factual. So understanding that you can make it by being a very private, very silent person. So let your work speak for you and not your words, right? So for me, that's why he's an enigma of a person, and it really inspired me that I'd want to do what he did also from the aspect of philanthropy and being able to do it at that scale. He was somebody who was very meticulous and very particular about his approach. So again, as I told you, when I read a book, I embody the personification of the person who's being talked about. So I'd like to find out more, because I've read it, I've listened to it twice as audiobook, but with audiobook at times you can get very distracted or it's not fully immersive. This one I'm actually taking my time to fully understand what it is that's going on in the psyche
What
of the person.
principles do you think you met in this book that maybe you've borrowed and you're actually using
So
to
for
do
me,
your personal stuff?
The thing about John D, he was a very, very plan the plan of the plan. And then the other thing again, which also ties in very closely with the intern of life, listen twice as much as you speak. And that's why you have 1 mouth and 2 ears. That was his philosophy. So when you're in the presence of somebody who knows something that you don't, keep quiet and listen. The problem is at times people want to talk too much, right? So you miss out on the nuggets.
Yeah.
And so for him, a lot of his deals were from where he was in a position where he listened and he was like, okay. So-and-so is doing this and this. How can I partner? So-and-so is opening a railroad here. How can I? So-and-so is about to close shop. How can I purchase that? So I'd say that just have a very meticulous plan, but he was also a very strong believer in self, and his divine gifting was given by God for a purpose. So have purpose in life beyond just, don't make money for money's sake, have purpose beyond making the money. And those are some of the things I'd say I've picked from his psyche and his character.
Yeah. You've listened to it twice and now reading it physically.
Yes.
Is there any new thing you encounter every time?
Absolutely. And I think that the beauty of rereads, it depends on the state of mind and what you are trying to accomplish out of the book back then, right? So, as I told you, and the first time I listened to it was before I read the Tony Robbins book. So I wanted to be like super rich, Forbes list, and be in that, top 100, top 30 under 30. So I was like, what did this guy do? Because he was one of the richest men in America by the age of 25. So I was like, I have to beat this guy. So also in a way, it was an interesting competition, understanding who your competition is, right? Second time I read it was a bit more mature. That was after reading the Tony Robbins book. And I was like, okay. So it was now understanding how was he able to scale. Now for me, it's understanding how legacy works, right? And this time I'm taking it very slow. And I'm even understanding, like now I'm highlighting a lot of the words. I'm like, I really also understand the context of the words, how it was used, and taking time and reflecting on what it was that he was thinking at that point, right? Because he talks about, because he came from a very poor background. But how do you come from such a poor background? What kind of state of mind do you have to have to overcome the limiting belief that I'm destined to be poor? But he said he's bound to be rich. And his life goal actually was to make $100,000. That was his life goal, but he surpassed it multitudes over, right? So it's understanding the psyche of overcoming and developing such strong self-belief in self that you focus so much on your purpose that the success is just as a consequence. Yeah.
Looking at all that, as we now I'm headed toward transitioning to your book.
Yes.
How important is self?
Everything. If you can't understand self, you can't understand anyone else. It's as simple as that. It's something Sun Tzu said in The Art of War. The person who understands self, no, actually, the person who understands the enemy but not self will win 50 of the battles. The person who understands self but not the enemy shall win 50. The person who understands self, then the enemy wins everything. Because self at times can be the enemy. So you can be the greatest videographer, you can be the greatest author, but if you don't see it, it's gone. And that's where esteem comes in. Again, back to emotional intelligence. How do you see yourself? What's your narrative about yourself? When you look at that mirror, do you see yourself as the most amazing individual in the world? Or do you see yourself as that dropout who will never achieve anything in life? So self-talk, self-belief, self-psyche, self-image is very important. And it's actually, I believe it's the determinant of everything. Because if you don't see it, don't expect anyone else to see it.
Sure.
Yes.
Now I transition to your book, Creative Thinking, A Journey Through 8 Facets of Intelligence.
Yes.
You can get it on Nuria. It's also available. And this guy has an app. You can actually download this book on Play Store and read it from the comfort of your mobile phone. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But John, tell us about Creative Thinking. Tell us about this book.
This one I'll actually take it back and accredit it back to my mom and where it all started, especially with wordplay. So I never realized until recently, I was like, where did this whole wordplay thing start? It started with my mom. We used to have sessions where we would laugh at people from different cultures. One case in point where like some of her Luya colleagues couldn't say heart and lung. They would say hetindi lang, right? And we would laugh around that. And that transition, it's something that stuck with me for a while, but especially when joining the agencies, one thing I noticed is I had a lot of ideas. A lot of ideas. So a lot of the guys would ask me, how do you come up with this stuff? So between 2012 and 2016, it was just ideas after ideas after ideas. But remember, I'm the developer programmer, right? But you're the one who is coming up with the ideas for some of these guys. They're like, man's easy ideas are not happy. So I realized part of the time I was also doing a lot of study on how the brain works and what's known as creative association, where you create connections amongst things that really don't exist or are not supposed to exist together. So I've done studies on, multisensory input and multisensory learning, which then now brought me full circle to understanding the 8 facets of intelligence. So the breakthrough process for me was like, the most creative things that you encounter have a lot of depth of intelligence, right? So how could I teach creativity in a very unique way that cuts across everyone? And then it also took me back to now I realized the breaks that occurred for me, especially in primary school. I never was very good at class because logic and language at that point were in my strong suits. But I was very visual. I'm what you call a professional daydreamer. The moment this session is over, I just go back into my mind and just think of all the crazy things that could be going on. But I spend a lot of time in my mind. So the visual spatial aspect was there. Anytime I learned something through speech or audio, I would recall it with great ease. So that's where the auditory aspect comes in. And then the other aspect I would realize, there's always a challenge I'd always hear about creatives. Man, creatives are on a pesa. And there's also a financial aspect to it. There's a financial aspect to the production of your creativity. There's a financial aspect to what it'll cost. There's a financial aspect to how much should you charge and to be able to have a sustainable income stroke profit balance, right? So all these things came together and I was like, okay, there is no way you can come up with novelty. And of course, now picking bits and pieces from all these different books, there is, when you put everything together, you then have collective or greater creativity and intelligence. And that's where now in 2017, I started off training guys online, either via Zoom or Skype, that this is my thought process. You guys wanted to know how it is I do it. This is my sequencing of information. And so, yeah, it went on, especially during COVID, it really picked. And then now, as I told you, I had a conversation with my brother who had already started. He was already an author. He had already written 2 books. And he told me, I showed him the training manual I use, and he told me, you can transfer this thing into a book. And that's how we got here.
Because it's one thing to have information, it's one thing to have knowledge.
Yes.
But at what point did it now dawn on you to say, I'm doing a book?
So yeah, and especially with a lot of the people I used to train online, they would say that the session was great, but what can you leave me with that I can continue learning? Of course, me in my head, I'm just thinking piracy, intellectual property, sikupati, manuali yangu. Si nimekufunza, ulisikiza, did you take notes?
Yeah.
No. But now it got to a point where I was like, okay, I have to figure out how to transcend this information to people who would really need it.
Yeah.
So again, logic intelligence now came, and I was like, so I need to write a book. What does it take to write a book from a cost perspective? What are the logistical issues around it? What kind of target audience do I want to reach? Now, I had about 14 limiting steps, which I highlight in the book. One of them was publishing rights. You either self-publish, you need the money upfront, or you get a publisher who takes a huge part of your rights. Partially because they have to do the marketing, they have to do the distribution, they have to do the printing, they have to do the layout, they have to do the editing. So they're doing a lot of it, and they take a very pretty percentage of that. So depending on the strength of your brand, some take 75% to the rights of the book. If you're a weak brand, they'll tell you, we'll give you a 5% right to your book. So they're retaining 95% of your book, but you just give us the manuscript. We'll do the rest for you. Right? So there's always that balance. I was like, hey, mi napenda vitu zangu. This is, for me, it's a gem. Let me stick to it. And I told you, I went to look for a few printers. One of them told me it's going to cost you 4,500. Okay, it's costing me 4,500 to print, but I want to sell it for 1,500. Again, cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
In the current economic situation where you need something that will be affordable, but that you can also earn something off. So I said, let me build it as an app, because I'd built a system that enables you to build dynamic questionnaires. So I said, again, repurposing, creative thinking. Do I have to build this thing from scratch? No. Let me repurpose this thing and make it be a manuscript generator. And then I took the same code and converted it now into the mobile app. And that's how I was able to do the digital book. So I ran with the digital book for a while, for like about a year. And that's how we ended up with the digital app. And then now eventually came back to do the print. Yes.
The app I found very, very creative. What was the process? How did you land the app? Because I know, yes, you're a techie, and somebody would outrightly think about it and say, it's one of those things when one evening when you're just relaxing in your bedroom and you just decide, that chord plus this one plus this one.
Yeah.
Just put it on the... But I would want to understand, I'm sure there was a whole thought process and a strategy behind it on saying, we have this versus this versus this, and we have this app and this. How did we end there at the app?
And the beauty of this is also a highlight of the creative process. At times, you'll always have to weigh your options. Which one grants me more merit? Which one grants me more benefit? So again, at the beginning of the book, I think if you could just share it with me, let me highlight the thought process behind it verbatim for how I ended up doing the book. So the first part of the introduction to the book is creative alternative to traditional publishing. So I got through a series of questions, that 14 of them, which is now a subset of logical intelligence, inquiring and interrogating your thought process. So how can I retain upwards of 90% of margins and royalties? Step 2, how can I increase my overall sales reach to a global audience within a matter of hours? 3, how can I reduce the book revision and reprint life cycle to less than 2 hours? How can I replicate the speed of market for this publication to other authors? How can I increase my passive income streams while reducing my overall work capacity? How can I avail more time and presence to my family? How can I leverage technology that I am already familiar with to reduce the turnaround times? How can I publish the book within a week? How can I launch a commercial and teaser version of the book at the same time without increasing costs or typing the excerpt? How can I embed rich media content where I need be? Can I have both a text format and an audiobook format in one application? That was the premise of me choosing the option. So the answers now that I got from these questions all led me to the approach of the mobile. Why? 80% of content on the internet in Kenya is accessed through mobile phones. So guys are already there, right? Part of the experiences that we had is I shared with you a coupon code within a matter of 2-3 minutes, you're already able to get it. That sorts out my distribution logistics, in that if somebody is in Japan, if somebody is in Denmark, if somebody is in Germany, and that's the case that's happened with some of the guys who have bought the book, it's in a matter of 2 minutes on a WhatsApp call. I send you the link and somebody's already straight and reading. Now picture this. There's the aspect of, if I was to translate this hard copy into 100 different languages, I'd need translators, I'd need whatever, and then reprint in those different languages. The irony is with the app, I can load those same manuscripts in the different languages, and what somebody has to choose is the language, and it'll automatically update. So the beauty of the app approach, it makes it a living experience. If I have any video content I'd want to add, I just update the manuscript and it updates globally. Now that I'll be working on the audiobook, I'll embed the audiobook as part of the app. You just get an update and it updates automatically. The distribution logistics with the mobile app cannot be achieved with a hard copy. But again, there are the people who love, and I'm one of them. I love the feeling of books, but when you're on the production side, the efficiency of mobile is way higher compared to that of the physical.
There is an author who is listening to you and enjoys and loves what you're talking about. But maybe it's a thought they've never processed, or they would imagine it would, I have to give my leg to have my book or books.
Yes.
What would you say to them, and how can you be of benefit? Because that is also part of the reason why we do What's on Your Shelf, to link
different people.
into.
So what I'd say about this process is, and I'm also very considerate, publishing is very costly. I know to do a small run for a book like this can cost you anywhere between 20,000, depending on the number of pages, to 50,000. I'm willing to come and negotiate with you at a very friendly rate and tell you that if you want your book done, I'll need maybe a week to do the turnaround, to digitize it for you. That's exclusive of proofreading. If you want proofreading, I'll give you an additional cost to that. But I don't think it's anything that can go beyond 30K. And you have the rights to your app. And however many downloads you make, enjoy the benefit of it. Right? And it's unlimited. Right? Of course, translation and other services, of course, will be a value add. But at a very basic level, that's it. And it'll allow you now to scale and get to other markets very quickly without the logistical issues. Because the irony is, if somebody bought this book today from Nuria, it will be 1,500, but it might cost maybe twice or thrice as much to ship it. Unless now you have a printer or a distributor like Amazon or an American or another distributor or printer publisher in that continent. So again, those are the logistical issues around it. For me, the distribution magic around giving somebody a link and it's straight on their phone, and in 2 minutes they already have the app running, for me was part of the pros of this approach.
Awesome. And we'll be glad to support you if at all you are an author who loves what John is talking about, and you'd want or interest yourself in having your book or books developed into an app. And I'm sure you can see the John's book on your screen right now as we're having this conversation. Feel free to reach out. Just comment on our comment section right below this book, and somebody's going to reach out to you to see how they can link you up to John, who will help you, or who you guys can now talk and have those services of having your book digitally in an app that is accessible on the go in whichever part of the world. But John, you've spoken about quick advantages, but now economically, what are some of the advantages you've realized from the app as opposed to the physical book?
When you look at the book, there's the printer's cost. So that's already a third of what your costing is. There's the demurrage and the book store's cost, which is another very big cut. So with the digital app, I'm retaining both of those, right? Then you add, maybe you might get a rider or you get a delivery service on top of that. If that delivery does not reach, if your book is rained on, if the border guy falls, if something happens to the book and it doesn't reach, that's a double cost to you. I don't experience that with the digital app. With reprints, that's another cost. If you have a big issue set with your books and you have to discard all of them, you can't sell them. You have to. That's a straight out loss. With this, it's just an update on the app, and you get a global update cross-board without the incurring the cost of reprint. So there are so many advantages that this poses. And then also the beauty of it is I've released the demo, a sample version that's 30 pages, and the full version at the same time. So there's a teaser and then there's the actual book. So you can get people to experience the book. Again, you're not printing samples, but when they're ready to transition over to the full book, they have already sampled the book. So that also has created a lot of conversion for me on the digital channels, where you give access to the sample, somebody reads, you leave them at a cliffhanger. Now they have to get the full book. Right?
I think for me, what fascinates me and what I like is the having consistency across board. Like you're sure there is just one version of your book that is available out there at any given point. And everybody has access to the same information, to the same, let me say, the aspects, like what you're saying, if you want to add a video to it, if you want to add a subtext to it, if you want to add an explainer. And sometimes also, I'm sure when people read now, there is direct feedback that now you
there
get.
is also possibility to extend it to that now somebody can respond to you, hey, I don't understand here. That's the beauty of it. And you see, it becomes a living book, because as we ever talk about MVP, this is the MVP of the book. There are so many things I'd want to add. I'd like to, if it would be actually awesome, now that I've even mentioned about augmented reality, that if somebody scans this, can I do like an introduction, a personal introduction? That when you scan the logo, you get a personal introduction to me. When you scan the image of the chapter, you get another personal introduction from me about what it is about. Or if you could revert to me, like now also with the audiobook update. So it makes it very... There are so many things you can't do with the traditional.
And makes me want to ask you, how would you say technology has influenced how we interact and consume content?
I think it's everything. It's from the fact that the moment you open your browser, every decision you've made has been informed by a technology, either through a cookie, squeeze mnalazimishwa, accept, or select a few. Those few selected are the ones that are being used. So literally, I'd say everything is created by data and some sort of algorithm that's tracking the efficiency around what it is you're doing, what to present to you. So a lot of your decisioning by there is not you, just so that you know. It's an algorithm somewhere tracking what you're doing and figuring out what to present to you next. So technology allows for efficiency, but I always tell people, technology is a tool. Don't become the servant of the technology. Remember, it's a tool. So as much as this thing is great and everything, for me, it's just a tool to allow for ease of logistics. Actually, for me, the biggest reason for using digital is logistical issues. Yes.
So you've spoken about 8 facets of intelligence in this book. Take us through the 8 quickly.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, for me, I look at intelligence as a holistic collection or amalgamation of these 8 facets. And the more of them you can identify, the better you are, right? So I believe the mind is a tool. And a tool is only as good as its utilization. So what the 8 facets enable you to do is enable you to, first of all, understand the fundamental constituents of that type of intelligence, and then how do you use it uniquely. So we can delve into each and every one of them slightly. So the first form of intelligence I tend to talk about is emotional intelligence, which is broken down into 2. Intrapersonal emotional intelligence, which now the foundation of self-belief and esteem, and then interpersonal emotional intelligence. How do you relate to other people? And how these 2 forms of intelligence, I'll explain how they relate to creativity, is, as I mentioned, you can be a phenomenon individual who has talents in so many different fields, but you don't believe in yourself and you never express those arts. No one is ever going to see them. But there is that, and I know all of you know, there's that one guy. This guy is not gifted in anything, but the guy's self-belief is the richest guy in Matani. But you look at this guy and you're like, how does this guy do it? That is a foundation of emotional intelligence. Self-belief and self-esteem, right? For me, that is the most potent and most important form of intelligence, in my opinion. Then you've now believed in yourself, you've come up with a concept. Let's say you've designed this mic. Somebody has to buy it, right? you need to sell it to people. We're a socialistic set of beings, and we need to engage with other people. So there needs to be some resonance between what you have created and what the consumer is going to get. So you need to understand how to empathize with the problems of people, with the needs they have, and then create a connection through resonance, right? So yes, you've created the mic. What are you going to do to resonate with the potential buyer? That's the second part of emotional intelligence, understanding how to relate with your fellow being and enable them to appreciate your creativity, right? We'll then now move to financial intelligence. As I was mentioning, everything has a cost. Production cost, opportunity cost, cost of purchase, cost of manufacturing, cost of production, right? And this is where creatives really struggle. And I say creatives holistically. You're an amazing artist. You're an amazing painter. You're an amazing, let's even say musician. But your art takes so long that by the time it's out, how much do you charge for it, right? It takes you 6 months to get paid, right? But it's because of some fundamental financial aspects. So you're an amazingly talented individual, but there's the aspect of finance that you lack. And it's a very big part. And the second aspect of it is understanding that no two creations are the same. There's somebody who created a 10-page book and charge it for 10,000 shillings. And there's somebody who make a 400, 500-page book and charge it at 600. Why is it that somebody would be willing to pay 10,000 for a 10-page book and no one is willing to pay 600 for a 600-page book? Boils down to value. And that's an aspect of finance. And I delve deep into aspects of understanding value, sentimental value, social value, monetary value, emotional value, right? And the effect that has on your creation.
I'm almost feeling like if I didn't think about financial intelligence, whatever that would bring to me is still taken care of by emotional intelligence
Yes.
and logical intelligence. I'm either emotional about something I want to buy or I'm spending on,
Yes.
or I'm logically thinking about it.
Yes.
Isn't it already taken care of, the financial intelligence?
Yes.
As a facet of intelligence on its own.
It's a very interesting assumption, and I'll pose the question back to you. And this is something you see every day. There's that guy who earns 60K. Na mtu amejipanga. He has a budget. He knows how much to spend. He plans for his expenditure. And there's that guy who earns 2 million bob, but by 50 he's broke. Who amongst those two is more financially intelligent? They both rely on, they both saw the same thing. They were both excited emotionally. But why is it that one was willing to wait it out despite having less, and this guy is broke by the 5th? It's a skill. It's a very important skill. That's why you see a lot of the info I have here revolves around finance, because it's something that I acknowledged I didn't have, again, based on the SWOT. So understanding that, you also need to understand, you need to have a budget. Impulsive buyers are the ones who suffer the most because it's an emotional thing. You have not rationally thought through it, right? So by understanding the fundamentals of finance and understanding like now aspects, of course it delves deeper into aspects of now expansion and scalability, or even your creativity and whatnot. The person with the 60K has a very solid understanding of finance, on financial concepts. So with this 60K, can I set aside 10K every month and compound it for the next maybe 20 years? While say, mshahara si itakuja, me I'm earning 2 mil, shida ni gani? But by 50 is broke. How
You
is
live
that?
once.
Yeah, YOLO. You only live once. So what's the difference in mindset? Right? So it's not, and I think that the ultimate test of finance, it's not in what is earned, it's in what is retained. And of what is retained, what is multiplied. That is the ultimate financial intelligence in the equation. Earn something, maximize retention. After maximization of retention,
Isn't that
what is
stinginess?
expansion? No, it's not. It's not. And you see, it's all about balance. And again, they say too much of something is dangerous. Maisari, I'd say that one uko inje. Have a balance. And that's why you have a budget. It's equitable distribution of your income to cater for your different needs and wants. Once you have that in place, and you see saving what? Let's say 10K. So looking at it from that perspective, it's a finite resource that you've distributed for different purposes. And remember I was telling you, let your money have purpose. So kama pesa yako ni ya YOLO, what happens if you lose that job? And how many companies are willing to pay you that money? Right? Especially in the current situation we're in. But umse wa 60K set aside, he's enjoying his life. He takes his family, he goes here, goes there, but he's planned, he has an intent for his money. That's where now the financial intelligence comes in.
Right.
Right?
Then there is physical intelligence.
Physical intelligence. This is also a very important one. And I talk about footballers, basketballers. These are people, dancers, gymnasts. These are people who have unbelievable capacity to utilize their body to represent something with their emotion or something with their activity that most people can't do. But it's never considered highly intelligent. And beyond that, one of the things I also talk about is how to increase your creativity through physical activity. So what tends to happen is when you're physically active, there's a set of hormones known as endorphins. And endorphins and serotonin, these are the feel-good, and oxytocin that tends to be released. And your creativity tends to shoot up when these hormones are released. So by being physically active, there are a lot of benefits you get. First of all, you get higher cellular regeneration, which means you get lower chances of disease acquisition, as well as better mental health as well, right? So there are so many benefits that you get from physical activity that also translate over to the creative process. Yes. So that...
Somebody who walks from industrial area to Madari,
Yes.
in the morning to work, and in the evening back home, they exercise.
Yes.
They're engaging that physical aspect of that intelligence.
Yes.
But they still have stress.
Now, stress, of course, the factors to stress are very many. Now, stress is basically produced by two hormones. That's cortisol and adrenaline. Now, in excess, physical activity actually helps you reduce it, right? Because the endorphins tend to bind with the stress hormones and reduce your levels of stress. But stress could be you've lost a loved one, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the physical activity. It could be, again, financial challenges. It could be emotional challenges. Somebody has broken your heart and whatever. So physical activity does help reduce your levels of stress, but it's not an eliminator of stress. That's where now stress management activities come in. You need to know how to manage stress. That's a different aspect altogether, but also physical activity does do that. So one of the things that I mentioned is I've done martial arts. And one of the key techniques that you're taught in karate is a technique known as moksu, right? And they're very aware. So moksu is basically deep belly breathing. So most people, I'll ask you a question. What's the first thing that happens to people when they're in a panic situation with regards to their breathing?
Yeah, the breathing is irregular.
Very irregular. It's very fast.
Yeah.
It's very panicky, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason that happens is you're trying to get in as much oxygen into your body as possible. But what you're doing is you're using the top part of your lungs. So your body needs a lot of oxygen because it's processing a lot of information. It's trying to figure out, how do I get out of this? How do I stay safe? How do I do this? And there's so many inputs happening at the same time. But the problem is, in your pursuit of trying to get in as much oxygen, you're breathing with the top part of your lungs, which is the 1/3, but you're leaving the bottom part. So Moksu inverts that. It enables you to take very deep, intentional breaths that are filling your belly. So instead of doing, you take deep belly breaths. So by being in that state of mind, you actually stay very calm, but you're very alert because your body has all the oxygen it needs. The reason a lot of people pass out is because you end up in a state of, what is it called? Hypoxia, where your oxygen is very low, right? So your body has no oxygen, it just blacks out. So that type of breathing is very critical to stress management because martial arts is stressful. Somebody is trying to kick your head off, 10 punches have been thrown at you, but you have to be calm. You have to analyze. I'm like, do I dodge? Do I duck? Do I do? Do I counter? Do I do? Do I this? But you're watching everything this guy is doing. You're alert, but you're very calm. It's because of being able to enable Moksu, even in a chaotic situation, that you stay calm. So yes, the stress factors are very high, but you're calm and you're managing your stress in that situation. Okay, you've been hit. Do I flinch? Do I react? Or do I wait to counter? So there are all these dynamics that go on, that even in a stressful situation, can you stay calm? Now, those are some of the physical techniques, physical intelligent techniques that I'm transferring, especially because you can't be creative when you're stressed for free. I'm telling you, I've been in situations where when I'm stressed, I don't even try to do any creative work. I just avoid it completely. But the moment I'm in that state of calm alertness and I have my endorphins going and all my all my oxytocin is flowing right, I feel very creative, right? So it's also to know when to be creative and when not to be. But physical intelligence plays a very critical role. So it will not eliminate your stress, but if you know the techniques to use, it will enable you to manage your stress better. Yes.
Awesome. What are you hearing? Which part of this country or this world are you watching us from? And what are you hearing from John? Because he has outlined 8 facets of intelligence. We will not cover all of them so that there is something for you to look for in the book when you buy it. And find it on Nuria. And also he has an app that I'm sure through his social sites and that he'll share towards the end of this podcast.
Absolutely.
Where and how you can find him. But what are you hearing about this whole conversation? What part of this conversation is tickling you or maybe nudging you and pushing you to a certain thought? Feel free to share with us your feedback right here on the comment section. And also, we will be happy to get back and continue that conversation on and offline. So, and to those of us who've not had a chance to subscribe, I would want to urge you to do so, because that is the only way you get to know whenever we upload another amazing conversation such as this. But also to you who is out there who would also want to be part of this community, feel free also to reach out. Give us your details or share with us your thoughts and comments, again, on the comment section. And somebody will be able to reach out to you. But what are you hearing? Which of these types of intelligence? I know we'll not share all of them so that you get something from the book. But what are you hearing? What is it that it's opening up to you? And you've spoken about 8, and there are a couple that are still remaining. There is emotional intelligence, logical, financial, physical,
Yes.
visual, auditory, linguistic, and spatial. We will not talk about all of them so that you buy the book. But there are 2 that are a bit, I would really like to get clarification.
Sure.
The auditory and linguistic.
Absolutely.
I would imagine they are one and the same.
Depending on how you look at it. So I create a keen distinction whereby I look at somebody who is linguistically or language-based intelligent, or somebody who understands a variety of languages. They're called polyglots, right? So somebody who can pick up language, they understand syntax, they understand grammar rules, and they understand how to use language to create effect. Now, from a creative perspective, they might be considered copywriters, the people who are like, no, you're a script writer. So how do you use language to create a certain emotion, right? And that's what the book is all about, connecting all of them. So it's not even just in the wording, it's in the tonality, right? It's like saying, okay, now this is where the auditory comes in. So I think this is where you're trying to get the distinction. So the wording is okay, but now the auditory will determine the tonality. If I tell you I'm okay, I'm okay. Those are 2 very different things, but the word is exactly the same. So that's where the distinction comes in. The word is linguistic. The tone is auditory, which has an underlying emotional basis. So you understand how the trifecta now comes into play, that you can write something, but you want the emotive output to be different from a linguistical perspective. But also how I look at language, especially in creativity, is language has the capacity to create or destroy a reality. What do I mean by that? There is this very interesting statement, and I usually ask people is, hey, how are you? Mi niko tu, nangangana. And you realize everything about the words that person have just spoken will create the reality for the rest of their day. Everything ni kungangana. His work, and he's struggling. Ama his work, iko tu, But you find somebody who's like, man, I'm good, I'm blessed, I'm feeling great. The use of their language will translate to how the rest of the day turns out. So that's where now understanding the fundamental aspect of linguistic, and then auditory side is somebody who's very keen on sound. So these are your musicians, your poets, your spoken word people, your narrators, your news anchors, where sound for them is everything. So it's either spoken or listened to. So that is where the distinction comes for me. They overlap very keenly because, yes, auditory relies on using language, but this one is very keen on even how sound. So like somebody who produces beats, a producer, there's no words there, but they're very keen on percussions, they're very keen on how a snare sounds, how the drum, the decibel quality, the depth of the bass. That's where now the distinction comes in. So it's not just necessarily structured to linguistic or grammar or syntax, but it's now to the aspects of sound itself. Yes.
You've shared several concepts in this book. But how would you say they influence your day-to-day life?
This is my everyday. Everything in this book, and I'm one of those people, I'll never write something I don't practice. So at the end of it, there's something that I outline that's known as an intellectual map, which is once you've gone through the 8, it's great. How do you create what's known as an intellectual map? So understanding your strongest facets of intelligence to your weakest. So at the end of every chapter, there's the activities that you do that will enable you create that intellectual map. So once you have this information, I've come to appreciate that for me, my strongest at this point in life facet is logic. I'd rate it as strong 9. Everything has to follow a certain sequence. So whatever it is, whether it's a creative output, a solution statement, or a problem definition I'm coming up with, it has to start with logic and interrogation. The same way I interrogated, I want to get it to publishing and authoring. I've never been in this industry before. I ask a ton load of questions. Then I ask about the emotional aspect. Whoever is going to use this, what problem am I solving for them? And how will they feel after that? Then I go to financial. What is the cost to me? What is the cost to person? Can I make something out of it? Because at times, you produce something that costs this much, but you make this much. So, and that's why at times revenue is not a very good indicator of financial capacity, because you're producing a lot, you're selling in the millions, but you're in perpetual loss. Your cost of production does not meet cost to retail. So it's understanding this thing I'm producing, how much is it going to cost me? How much am I going to make? And how scalable is it? How quickly can I repeat this from a financial perspective? I then transition the information over to, let's say, language. What language can I use to present this information? How is it? Am I going to produce an auditory concept? And then visually, how am I going to represent it? Right? So it trickles down through that intellectual map until now I'm able to come up with a conclusive answer of everything I need to do to bring this creation to life. So at times, and the thing about it is not all creations are equal. There's also something known as prioritization. I can come up with something that will enable me get to 1 million people, and it will take me an hour. Versus I can come up with something that will take me 10 years and only 10 people will buy. Which one do you pick? And this is the challenge most people have. That you have all these ideas, but you haven't prioritized them because not all are equal. There's one that will have a higher cost implication. There's one that will have less. There's one that will have higher reach. There's one that will have less. So you also have to understand that the reason why this is a journey is because I take you through in-depth on how to use all of them together. So for me, this is, and that's why I've reread it. There are times I get some and I'm like, okay, let me refer to how I would use the creative thinking approach. Yes.
There's something you mentioned to me in passing.
Yes.
That I want to bring up. You say there is something I'd really want now to get the picture correctly where you're saying, I mentioned that you're a rapper.
Yes.
And you said that through a certain concept, you found yourself actually doing music, and it's a concept that can help an aspiring musician who's perhaps somewhere listening to this conversation. Tell us about that.
So, no, I don't know. Sijui niwaangushie rai moja mbili.
Tupatie lines.
There's a very interesting challenge I've put in the book. I think that's under Auditory Intelligence, that can you come up with a concept using a word, either your name, a friend's name, or something else. So the other day I was just listening to music about 3 months ago, and I asked myself, I do a lot of wordplay. And that's one of the next books I'm going to be working on. It's called Japan, right? So what if I could just figure out how these guys structure music and maybe just come up with a very basic...
Who? Japanese?
No, Japan. And that's the next book I'm working on, right? And I'll explain it, right? So I do a lot of puns, and I was listening to music, and I came across this documentary by VOX, and they were walking through the concept of the greatest lyricists alive, especially in hip hop. So I was keen. I watched the thing and I was like, wow, this is amazing. So this is how these guys think, but they're doing the same thing that I do with the wordplay. But this is another level because I don't understand music. So I asked myself, okay, so how is music structured? And I was like, okay, so the fundamental aspect to it is a beat. The beat makes up a bar. A bar is a consistence of 4 beats. So it's dum, 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 dum. That's a bar. So you need to come up with a series of words that make up that bar. And then a chorus or a hook is made up of a is made up of 8 bars, and then the main verse is made up of 16 bars. So I was like, okay. So the first one I did about, it was a Father's Day concept that I did for my son. So I created a rhyming scheme. I got this boy, his name is Kenzo. One day he gon' pull up in a Benzo. Na ya pia afikisha Ferrari Enzo. And his wife atajua tu mapenzo. So that's just the Benzo, Enzo, Ferrari, Enzo, and then I also did one for the daughter side, and then I now combined it with one of the originals that I done. Nina mabaski bao, sana sana msibu wa Easter, unaweza ni ita barista, juni kahawa na make. Nina mabaski bao, wanani ita baba yao, baba mzazi, baba kinyozi, mimi ndiyo baba yao. Nina mabaski bao, mi hu chill na manyuki, unaweza nipata na nyuki, nikipati tu na mababi, na ukiongezea loan, niko na Babylon. So it's Baba, but the concept was, if a rapper was to rap about Easter, I was thinking about Lamaz and Calligraph Jones, those Kenyan rappers. Those guys are really good. So I was like, if these guys, again, just hypothetically, what if conversation in my head? So I was like, okay, I was able to come up with that. I was like, 20 seconds. So I went on. So to the point now, I actually started buying beats and playing over them. So I could just do like the latest concept I have. This is called Japan, which is a promotion for my book. So it's going to have a lot of wordplay where I utilize a lot of homophones and homonyms, right? Yeah. So I hope the volume will be able to capture. So this will be out by September. So it goes like, I'll be big in Japan, so many pants, too many pants, catching down bands, so many fans. I'll be flowing with the essence, you can call me flow essence, shining so bright just like the flow essence. I'll be big in Japan, so many pants, too many pants, catching down bands, so many fans. I'll be flowing with the essence, you can call me flow essence, shining so bright just like the flow essence. I'll be in the kitchen, I got many pans, big time flow, call me big pan, angi pans mangen, Ibro lunga Japan, angi Q, Ibro you the Japan, full of pants to my knees, I'm the real Japanese, I'll be shot to my knees, you can call me Chinese, drinking shot to my knees, I'm the real Chinese, I'll be uncle, no girl, you can say no knees, I'll be frying eggs, utafurahia, nikidrop pants pia, utafurahia, kama ndazi Obama, itafurahia, kuna venye na kuona, ninafurahia, mi uhepa wa Kisii, manze kisirani, tunakimbilia maji, tunakuwa majirani, running. Niko Kasarani, alipata mimba, ako mata Kasarani. I'll be big in Japan, so many pants, too many pants, catching them bands, so many fans. I'll be flowing with the essence, you can call me flow essence. So many pants, catching them bands, too many pants, so many pants, big in Japan.
Awesome.
So, yes. Now, what I did here was what's known as wordplay. I'm using homophones. If you realized, Jacaranda, Jacaranda. I've even switched now. This is now practical. So we're using auditory, linguistical. And actually, it's auditory and linguistical mostly to be able to come up with this concept. So I'm using a lot of wordplay. And that's what the book is all about. It's all about puns, right? So even a lot of the content you've heard in the song would be, but I wouldn't be able to get the words to this point where I'm getting them if I didn't understand bars. So for me, I'm a fundamentalist. If you want to do music, please, I've listened to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of music and I realized there's some songs where somebody's rapping, it's off the bar line. And now I know why that sounded off. Because it's all about 1, 2, 3, 4. So it has to stop on the 4th line. Now, unless you're very good, there are people who can extend it and it still flows very well into the next. Yeah. But most people who don't understand bar structure can't be able to rap very well to the song. So that was the foundation for me. So this is my longest song. I think it's about 3 minutes 50 and it's just full of pan.
You're making the rest of us who've been writing music unscientifically question.
Yes, and you see, actually, the other aspect is logic. Because I asked, so going back, you see, so it's logic, linguistic, and auditory. So auditory, linguistic, I've been doing puns the whole time. That has not been an issue. But now, how do you put it together? So again, I'm creating a picture, right?
But now, John, the question that now I'll pose to you is, where is the... Because now our deviation, because if you look at the modern rap, has really deviated from hitting on the bar, and hitting on the note, and working on the flow through the notes and through the bars. It's a bit deliberately taken off, and it kind of navigates in and out of the bars and the key places where the notes are hitting.
Yes.
And that is what we call creativity. And we're saying we've creatively ignored That principle.
So
Where do you place that?
I'll tell you for free. After listening to that, there are people who have mastered it. Like I know one of the people who had been featured was Notorious B.I.G. He would stretch his words, but he was a lyrical genius. His rhyming scheme was both internal, external, at the beginning, at the end. Very few people can do that. Now, if a master does it, it sounds exceptional. If somebody does it wrong, it sounds horrible. So yes, it's creative, but there's that structure for a reason. Use it. And like also one of the things I've really tried to do is like for certain words, flow. Actually, like what I've realized I want to do with any form of creative music I want to make my voice also be part of the instrumentals, right? So the way I enunciate certain words, the way I what is it called, pronounce that prrr, I make it as part of like a percussion or the part of the instruments. But if you don't understand how to do that, for me it's a study, right? Study your craft, master your craft. For me, this is a hobby. I'm using it as an interesting way to highlight the potential of creativity. And one of the things I tell people is that creativity allows for discovery and reinvention, right? If I never took on that subtle thought process that, can I try this? How would it turn out? Can I investigate? Can I interrogate? I would not be able to do that. But that's what it allows me to do. And I've realized, okay, with every iteration, I'm getting better. I even came up with a song about legal affairs. And that's because I was reading now the civil statutes and the laws and the issues of Kenya. And I was like, what if I was a lawyer who was trying to transition to a rapper? How would I rap? So I took a lot of those technical terms, magistrate, arbitrator, litigator, and I came up with interesting wordplay around it and came up also with a similar concept. So
is it a well that is available to only people in hip hop, or it can be available to other people of other genres? Because
I think it's the moment you understand structure, it cuts across. Because I realized.
And now you brought in pronunciation. I'm worried about I don't want to mention the region where
hiyo tunawatambua hapa ndivyo wacheza kidogo, but I don't think it's limited to the genre, because again, if you look at even composition of, because my brother is also a composer, my daughter also does music, piano and whatever. She's actually the one teaching me, so it cuts across. So now, lucky for her, she knows how to count bars, she knows how to go to the bar line, but she can also compose. So even in music, they use the same concepts, that it's every 4 beat or every 4. I think it's a quartet or something. I'm also understanding now the deeper aspect of it. So the moment you understand that concept, music, the structure is universal. Yes. So I think it's not limited to that, but I'm not going to do anything. I tried doing an R&B song. Actually, the first one was an R&B one. I was just told, no, you don't have the voice. I said, amen. Nimekubali.
But now looking at your life post the book, what are some of the key pointers you'd say? Now, these are some of the transformations I can see post the book.
For me, I think I wrote this book for 4 people in particular. My 4 children, 2 biological, 2 nephews. And the effect of it is, when somebody goes to this book and tells me, I had no idea that this even exists, and that now I can see my child, even like not for parents, and I usually tell parents that what works for you might not work for your kids, but by being able to understand the different capacities that even your children, or the giftings that your children have differ from yours, you're better nurtured towards training them to maximize their full potential and be the best version of themselves. That for me is one of the biggest things that I take as a takeaway. And that is what I really want to do. I said, for me, I'm never going to get into politics. It's not my cup of tea. But can I teach as many people the tools that they need to enable them, especially from a younger age, to live to their maximum capacity? I think for me, that for me has been the biggest impact, the feedback that people are giving about the change that the info in the book has granted them.
Earlier you mentioned about you being in martial arts. How would you say the principles of martial arts have also shaped your perspectives or influenced how you live your life?
So I'm actually going to do a book on that same exact topic.
Martial
life lessons I've learned from martial arts.
And you've been in it for more than 20
2
years.
2 decades, yes. I've been doing it since high school. I started when I was 13. Actually, this might be my 21st year doing martial arts. It's not been consistent, but every day, like even when I come back home, I do at least an hour or so of training just to keep the reflexes
You will not
high.
kick all these things I'm seeing here.
That is what I did. But you came and you found you ndio mmeleta vitu. This place is usually very empty and it's intentional. So I'm also training my daughter on a few of the concepts and techniques, of course, helping her with the flexibility. But the thing about martial arts is, again, it enables self-discovery. I am one of those people who I avoid conflict. But if you bring it, the hell on earth I will bring on you. And I will finish it as quickly as you start it. But I will walk away like nothing has happened. I love my peace. But if you destabilize it, I'll not assault you. But if you attack me, I will return the ferocity. But the concept of martial arts for me is not about fighting. It's about what martial arts does. It instills a discipline that you can't take away, right? It enables you to understand that there's progress through pain, and it builds that mental resilience. Now, the beauty of it, one of the best takeaways from martial arts for me is it enables you to be comfortable with the discomfort. And that's a very critical thing in life. So it prepares you for shock. That when certain things happen in life, you're mentally prepared. Because it's not an easy thing. By the time you're done with that session, your body is usually fatigued, you're tired. And I always used to ask my coach, I'm paying you to cause me this amount of pain and whatever, but kesho najileta. There's something it does to your body, because it also enables you to show your body you have the capacity to progress beyond your limits. Maybe today I was able to kick this high, tomorrow I kick higher, the next day I kick higher. Now, as you can see there, we're almost doing a full 180-degree split, but it's because of that progress, that persistence. And it's in the concept of Kaizen, progressive enhancement in small things every day over a long duration of time. So I think about 30 or so key topics I'm going to talk about in the book. It'll be a very niche book, but for me, I'm going to, as France really inspired me, I'll just write the manuscripts. So I think I have about 12 in draft now. I've already started on them, that being one of them. And for
Talk to us still on that space of martial arts.
Yes.
Talk to us about the philosophy of Kaizen.
Kaizen for me is everything. And everything again still ends up going back to learning and intern of life. So I love Japanese philosophy. And there's two very critical philosophies that I follow. Kaizen is one of them. Ikigai is another. So for me, Kaizen is one of the things I do. I never compete with anyone. And I used to compete a lot, everything, swimming, martial arts, whatever. These days, the only person is competing with the person I was yesterday. Have I made a progressive improvement to be better than the person I was yesterday? As long as I do that, you get your Ferraris, you get your Lamborghinis, me, I'm okay. As long as I've made one progressive step forward. The beauty of Kaizen is it allows you to see life from a very long-term perspective. It's not in the now, it's not in the whatever. And I can give a very simple example. This is one of the things I've always told my juniors or my interns. I only learn 3 new things a day, right? If you only learn 3 new things a day, you'll be ahead of your competitors or your peers by a factor of almost 100 in 10 years. Because 3 things a day times 30, that's 90 in a month, right? Times 12, okay, so 90 times 10 is what? 900 plus 180, that's 1080. So now you'll learn 1080 new things. Then in 10 years, that's 10,800. That's only 3 things. What if you move it to 5? What if you move it to 10? What if you're able to do 30 new things a day? But it all boils down to the concept of Kaizen. Progressive enhancement done consistently over a long duration of time. You can't beat that. It's better than trying to do 100 things today, then 20 tomorrow, then a big break, and then you go back. But if you do small increments every day, and you see, it doesn't take much. And I tell guys, ask me, how do you read so much? I tell them, my commute time is my sacred reading time. I'm in a mat, I have my book. That 1.5 hours going, 1.5 hours coming, I'm able to do about a book a week. But I don't even think about finishing the book. I just find I'm on the final page, right? When I'm driving, I have audiobooks. So I don't even think about it. But it's just that small progressive enhancement every day over a long duration of time. And I'll do about 20 pages in the morning, 20 pages in the evening. It's a 200-page book, 5 days I'm done. But I don't think about it. It's just that autonomous progressive enhancement over a long duration of time. And that's why I'm able to do give or take.
Do you think you're very strict? Are you? do you think you're very strict?
People see me as such. Because, you see, I've automated a lot of the things. So I don't see it as such. But where I'd say I'm particular is, for example, I see you have a flat tire and I tell you, change that flat tire. And hii pressure itanifikisha, then the tire blows and the car rolls over. And that car was in my possession. Is that strictness or is that caution? You get? And especially with some of the things, like some of the work I've done, like there was a time we used to work in fintech and guys used to be like, you're so particular. And then an application got hacked and money was lost. Now it is your code. And you're telling people, guys, listen, we told you guys you need to be very particular about this thing. You guys overlooked it. And this is what I saw. Mkasema, you're being too whatever. For me, it's when you see, and that's part of the things I also talk about, how to use fear and failure analysis. As part of your planning, you have to plan for your failure so that you prevent. Use it as a tool, not as a limiter, right? So me, that's how I look at it. Some people who might not understand where I'm coming from see it as I'm very strict and very rigid. But would you like to enter a plane? Again, this is the question I always pose. Would you want to enter a plane that has been maintained by a particular engineer or mtutua hivi hivi? So there are certain people, certain personalities that fit certain roles. And you also need to appreciate. There is the guy, kuna mtu kitaka sherehe. There is that guy you pigia. But if you need an articulated, detailed approach to something, look for me. Right?
This is the only person, by the way, since I started doing my interviews on What's on Your Shelf, where as we were walking through his home, there is a sticker on the door. Silence, please. Recording is in progress. Tell us about that. What's
So, I have some very interesting neighbors, and I think it's a youth thing.
Yeah.
I think you've had a few things going on.
Yeah.
And also, usually when guys are going up the stairs, hey, the stories you hear. Guys speaking at the top of the voices. So it was more for the people who are going up, just to be aware that be courteous. So I've also gone to a few of the neighbors. I've told them, like, our upstairs neighbor, I think they work out at home and they have a tendency to drop a lot of things. So I had to take those into consideration. So just inform the guys, you guys have your fun, but just like you've heard of that.
I was so impressed, by the way.
Yes.
When I saw it, I was so impressed.
Yeah.
But now looking at John today, what is in John's upbringing? What is in John's childhood that has shaped who John is today?
I'd say spending time with my mom. My mom has made the smallest spaces feel like the biggest mansions, just because of her love, her authenticity. And one of the things, if you look at me, I think I'm the female version of my mom. She doesn't take life too seriously, but I'm a very big joker. So, it depends on the people who meet me. Like, as you're saying, like the strictest, the guys who have never seen that ounce. I'm the biggest party dancer that you never... Yes. So it depends on the perspective you see me from. And I think I get that duality. There are times to be serious, there are times to have fun. And I think for me, it's just that finding that balance, that I can blend the perfect balance between the two. But I think for me, it's just my mom's philosophy to life. It doesn't have to be big, but value what you have, no matter how little. And I think it's just the contentment. I got a lot of that from her, that be okay with where you are, with what you have.
Allow me to ask, I've heard you mention your mom a lot, but I've not heard you once mention your dad.
He's been a very critical influence. So again, our upbringing was a bit interesting because I was born at a time when they're separated. So I experienced both. So him is a uni professor, very focused on career and everything, very articulate, very charismatic guy. But I spent a lot more time with my mom, right? So a lot of my life experiences have been geared around seeing how she responds to stress. Very composed lady, right? And a lot of even the things I've learned about finance are from her. And that's where that retention thing came from, because I saw her do a very impossible feat with the home ownership that I was like, till today, I ask her, how did you own that home? Because it was an impossible feat. Foresight. She has a lot of foresight. She has the capacity to take the smallest input and figure out how to multiply it. So a lot of my life lessons were around, because I spent a lot of time with her, but it's also just the emotional equilibrium she brought to the equation. She was always a very jovial guy as a person. As I told you, she was the one who would always do these word plays. And regardless of the size of the house we were in, I always just enjoyed the presence. So for me, it's something I took that it's not about, I really wanted to own like an 18-bedroom house, right? Now I'll be more than content with a 3-bed house. And for me, even that proximity, that I can, within the next few minutes, I can be able to see where my kids are. I don't need that. I don't need it. And that aspect of contentment. So I'd say that that would be the biggest aspect I got from that experience with her.
But would you ever say you have experienced him to? I'm trying to be fair, not to
No,
push
it's true.
That is,
it's an emotive issue,
Yeah.
because again, you see, now that's why I told you that book has been very influential to me, fatherhood.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I'll tell you, and if you're watching as a parent, it's not what you buy for your kids. Your presence is the ultimate present for your children. Your time. Because the number of things I've been able to do with my daughter in 5 years, I don't think I'll be able to experience in a lifetime with my folks. But it's just because of my presence. And I think COVID also helped with that, because I was home a lot. So, and all these things, like even she knows the lyrics word by word for those songs. She knows the bar count for those songs word by word.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things about like fatherhood for me is I've created a space of vulnerability where I can tell I don't know something and it's okay. We'll learn together.
Yeah.
And that presence, there are things about what I do. She's very keen into 3D modeling because maybe some of the cartoons she watches. So we are doing a 3D modeling program. Things that look very complex, there's no bias for them. So she's learning. When I'm sitting there and I'm doing my work, she's looking at what I'm doing and she's picking it up.
Yeah.
But it's that presence, that's the criticality for me, right? So for me, my narration of the story about my parenting journey is presence is the ultimate present. And it's not what you live for them, it's what you live in them that counts. So that's why for me, critically, even like this thing as a parent, we already know, we've already figured out what her learning or what her strengths are, and we're gearing everything for her around those strengths. So I think that's the duality of the situation. The presence wasn't there, right? And for me, I felt that you always have that longing to get to know someone, but hakua. And sadly for me, it's also because of the amount of alcohol consumption. That's why I abstain from alcohol. It's just because I saw what it did to him. He's a brilliant, exceptional man. I have the highest respect and esteem for his intellect and his capacity and his individualism and his ability as an individual. But at times it feels very distant because I don't know who you are. And there's nothing as amazing as having the presence of your father, but I never got it. So that's where the challenge comes for me, right? That I'd love to build this connection with you, but I never got your presence.
Yeah.
Yes.
I totally am in sync with you in so many fronts because especially when you're speaking about your daughter, I like how you light up in this smile.
Man,
and I feel it. Last week
amazing.
actually, on this podcast, I hosted my daughter who is 6.
Wow.
And she has been the biggest fan of What's on Your Shelf. And when I was preparing to host her, I was confident.
Yes.
I was confident she understands
how
it goes and she knows the ins and outs of what the
what to
podcast
expect.
demands.
Exactly.
And actually I was really, really happy that she's picked up reading. She was able to articulate herself and speak about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you never know what influence you have on the kids that you don't even tell them, how to do it.
Absolutely.
But they pick up. But now looking at that in retrospect, what type of father has these experiences made of you?
For me, I usually ask me, so you're going home straight? I'm like, yes. I've made my family my friends. And there's nothing as amazing as the other day we had an issue with the car and there was a circuit that had blown. So again, parents, learning is in everyday things. So one day I buy a multimeter and she asks me, what's this? I tell her it's a multimeter. She asks me, what's a multimeter? I tell her it's used to measure electricity. Next thing is, what's electricity? It's what we use to light the house. Where does it come from? So we go through this whole source of where electricity comes from and everything. And so I explained to her, this is what a fuse is. She's like, what does it do? It prevents this. So the learning was engaging. I told her, I have an issue I need to sort out. Can you come fix it out with me? So we took out my toolkit. We bombarded the whole dashboard. We took out the circuit. We took it apart and I showed her, this is where the issue is. Can you smell that? What does it smell like? It smelled burnt. So the circuit had short-circuited. So it was perpetually in an open circuit state. So it was drawing current from the battery. And just in that instance, we have learned maybe 9 or 10 concepts. She's figured out a practical skill that when she gets her own car, she's going to be able to do without being conned by some cheeky mechanics. But it's because of that availing the presence and the opportunity in the everyday things of what you do to learn something new. And it's not something that I'd pre-planned or anything. It's just involving them in what you do will grant them such a huge acceleration in life.
The life lessons,
The life
position
lessons,
themselves along
exactly.
as your journey.
Exactly. So for me, that's how our learning process is. And the beautiful thing is she's also picked up reading. So she has her own basket there. I think there are about 100 or so books. She's gone through them maybe twice or thrice for the smaller ones. The bigger ones, where I think maybe there are 5 or so that we're still in the progress of going through. But it's because every day we spared aside 15 minutes every day before she went to sleep to read 2 books. And that's it. By the time she was able to read, she now took it up and ran with it.
Awesome. And I would want to meet her, and I would like to, we're journeying towards building a kids literature event towards the end of the year. And I'll be happy to have your daughter together with mine. And anyone who is watching us today, we have on 20th of October, we have Mashuja wa Kusoma, who are kids who've read more, at least 25 books. And also that will springboard us to the end of the year event, which I hope all of us will now come together and celebrate what we can be able to do together with our kids as we read and as we share knowledge through literature.
Absolutely.
But John, I'm sure if we can talk about parenting and all these things, it's a very emotive issue.
Yes.
But do you think parenting has changed? Looking at what we experienced versus what is currently...
I'd say so. There is a very big evolution. And I think maybe fundamentally, in my observation, there are 3 key distinctions with regards to parenting. One is the dynamic of provide a natural role. And again, I extend a lot of empathy to the parents in the previous generations, because especially the dads, and I really empathize. You never understand someone until you walk a mile in their shoes. You were solely responsible not only for your family, but the extended family, the cousins, everyone who comes to Nairobi has to pass through your place. And these guys are staying here for like 2 months on end, and you had to cater for all of that. So there was the side of that, and then there's also the cultural influence. Now I think we're a lot more broader in terms of even understanding ourselves as individuals. And emotion was a very critical part of that. So there's a very big difference. And I think we have a lot more information. For me personally, I made a vow to be more involved with the involvement of the kids. So there are certain things that in our household, it's very funny. You'll find me washing dishes at times, and I'm very okay. It's not a feminine role. You used the plate, it's dirty, you need a clean space. Wash it. At times, your partner might not be well. Can you help? And again, that's an aspect of emotional intelligence. Can you extend empathy to your partner? But also with regards to kids, I think we have enabled them to be more expressive, which I've also noticed a very big difference, because you would never speak up to an adult. You would never express your emotions to an adult. If you cry, unaongezewa ingine, unalia kwa nini, nitakuongezea ingine unyama. So we had a lot of repression.
Slaps were somewhere.
Slaps and the pinch, the long pinch, right? So I think we grew up very emotionally repressed. We held in a lot because we never expressed. And as recent as the other day, there was a time I think I was here alone with the kids, and my daughter just noticed, you're a bit off, Dad. And I told her, I'm a bit scared and I'm a bit concerned about something. And I explained why, right? That's something most parents traditionally would never do. So it's also to humanize you as the parent, because there are days you'll be off. And even there are times when I know I'm not feeling great, I just tell her, by the today, Papa is not in a very good mood. Can you just give me some space? It has nothing to do with you. I love you and I have all the adoration for you. But today, Papa is not in the best mood. Could you just give me some time? That is something that I know would never have. You would have received the biggest backlash now. Chapwe plus kiboko. So it's a very big difference. We are a lot more emotively expressive as parents, but I think we're also enabling and empowering our kids to be a lot more expressive. But I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'll say this is how I'm looking at my parenting journey. I want to be involved. I also want to learn from them, because I realized I'm learning music from my daughter. She's teaching me piano. She's teaching me how to play the record. And at times she can be a bit mkali, but I enjoy it. But I'm open to also learn.
Yeah.
from her. There are certain skills, and I believe learning, it can be bi-directional,
Yeah.
right? So I can teach as much as I can learn from you. So I think those are the subtle differences, and I think also access to a lot more information now has really helped. But yes, it's a big difference from how our parents brought us up.
John, as I journey towards the end, I cannot close without talking about AI. What's your take on AI?
I'm a purist as a craftsman. I've used AI once, and I think the only time was how to get Kenya out of debt in 5 years or something. And the AI, I think ChatGPT told me that's an impossible task. You cannot. And I was like, that is the beginning and the end for me. So AI, again, it's a tool. It's like, you see, when Google came, and the beauty is, I also studied the evolution of technology. First, there was the mailbox that the mailman used to deliver the mail.
Yeah.
Yahoo came and obliterated that. Then from there, the phone came, which then now was just a standalone phone. But now your phone is the camera, it's a mic, it's a recorder, it's the FM station. So the inevitability of the assimilation of AI, there's nothing much I can do about it. Would it be better if I know how to use it and understand how to use it? Yes. Am I too keen on using it for my creative work? Absolutely not. I'm a purist. I prefer the process, the creative process. Right? It makes things easy. There are pros and cons to it. And I think, again, Franz mentioned that there's a point in time known as the unity or the oneness where AI takes over everything. So depending on which side of that fence you're on, you're either completely eliminated and displaced from your craft.
What should we do?
Regulations is one. I'm not an AI specialist. There are guys who would be better placed to answer that. I'd say, in my opinion, go back to more mechanical things. If it's software controlled, just a lot of things are being taken over. Job displacements are happening. But there are some mechanical things like plumbing. It will take AI a lot of time to figure out how to do plumbing.
It's very interesting to hear that from you, especially being somebody who is in this technology space and things like that. It's really, really interesting because I'm almost asking you, I for a very long time, I've thought there is a relationship between AI, AR, VR, not because of the abbreviations,
There is.
but you're the first person who is on this tech side of world who's not so excited about AI.
I think about the humanity, because a capitalist will see the efficiency of what AI will bring. It will reduce your turnover. It will increase your turnover by 1,000%. It can work tireless hours. But what's the emotive? Like now, if I was to be interviewed by a robot, the emotive aspect would be missing. It'll just be fact. So now tell me about it's just very factual. So even when it comes to art, these days I appreciate art a lot more. I want to see the mistakes in the stroke. I don't want perfect art. I want to see the humanness in that, right? But the flip side to it is it will grant us more time to do that. So there needs to be the balance. The capitalists will be the ones who make the pivotal point. Because yes, now instead of having waiters, you have robots. Instead of having chefs, you have robots. Instead of having baristas, you have robots. So what happens to the humane aspect of it? And then, and one of the things this thing can also do is figure out how to create, as it's developing its own personality, figure out how to create malicious intent as part of its output, and who judges that. And I believe that was a very in-depth conversation you had with Franz on his challenges with AI. I'm the same. In fact, if you've watched the Matrix movie, any of those futuristic movies, you'll come to appreciate there's a truth to it, right? So it's just let it be used as a tool, but also have a complementary skill that is mechanical. That's why I'm also moving to a lot of the mechanical skill sets as well, so that there, in case there's any job displacement, unaweza ruka ile side ingine.
Yeah. But now, as somebody you have several years of experience in this technology creative space, to a young person, a young professional who is venturing into that space, what advice would you give?
Take your time and have an end game in mind. What do I mean by an end game? Know what you want in life. Don't get caught in with the catching up or keeping up with so and so. And one of the things I said is there are certain milestones I had set they took time. It won't happen overnight. And practice your craft. The better you practice your craft, the more efficient you have. Then I think the last thing I'd say is just focus on value addition. Add as much value through your craft as you possibly can. And that way, of course, now the value will also be added back to you in form of compensation in one way or another.
Looking at everything we've spoken about, is there free will?
Wow. I know you had that conversation with Franz. You see, I'm following your content. So, there are certain constraints on
Because I'm forced, because I'm looking at your analogy of this whole intelligence and the creativity and the presets that are pre-created.
Yes.
Either by learning or by the virtue of environment or the consequences of the result.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you about. Free will is based on the bias of the intent. What is your intent of the will? And what bias does it create? Because, what do I mean by that? Everybody knows assaulting you is a crime. But to what context does that assault become a validity? Case in point, there are guys who use extremism to cause certain things to happen, but they tell you it's your free will and it's a rightful thing to do. But on the flip side, the bias of the person who has been inflicted or has been harmed sees that not as free will. So the intent and bias are what determine the validity of free will. Because somebody says, this is my will or my free will to do ABCD, that I have the capacity to do this. The other person says, it's against my moral fiber. Then there are the constraints around free will. We have the illusion of free will in so many domains, but there is a level of people that ensure certain things happen in certain ways to ensure that your free will is limited. So there are constraints to free will. Is it an illusion? I don't know. I am not a philosopher, so I cannot comprehensively answer that. But I know the catch about free will is there has to be an intent and there has to be a bias that sustains that intent to ensure the validity of free will.
Yeah.
So it all depends on perspective. Yes.
John Akello, author of Creative Thinking. Find it on Nuria. And also, he has an app that if you find him on his social platforms, you'll be able to get and to know where to find it. John, how can somebody find you?
So in case somebody is interested in getting any of the other platforms, I'm currently building my website, but it currently has the links to all the books. So it's dapperjd.com. The link to Nuria will be there. My contact information will be there.
Say that again slowly.
Dapper, DAPPER, jd.com. It's my current website. I'm currently working on it. So nimetibu kila mtu sasa nimeamua nijitibu na my own website. But the content will be there. All the contact information will be there. And yes, so that's where you can find the links to the book, as well as if you're interested in any speaking engagements. As I mentioned, I teach this as a course, so you can follow up there. Yeah.
No better way to end it. John, thank you so much for allowing us into your space and your journey and your travels through your literature and your wisdom. And thank you also for sharing with us all your learnings and the things you experiences.
Absolutely.
And also you who's watching us, thank you so much for journeying with us to the very end. This has been a conversation with John Akello, the author of Creative Thinking. And now to come Japan, that name Japan will surprise you what that Japan looks like. But I will leave that for the right time. But thank you also so much for having been a fan and a follower of What's on Your Shelf, the space where all of us travel through stories and literature. And of course, we continue to build this community. Have you liked? Have you subscribed? Feel free to share this content with your friends and networks, because that is what this content is meant to do, to be out there, to be experienced by any person who needs to hear what we are talking about here. Thank you so much. This has been brought to you in partnership with Nuria Bookstore, which is the leading online book space. They have a physical bookstore on the Baza Plaza, which is on the first floor of the Baza Plaza in Nairobi CBD. I also have an online space on nuria.com. Check them out. But also we have the Kenya National Library Service, who are also our partners in this podcast. They have two major locations in Nairobi. There is the Maktaba Kuu in Upper Hill, and there is also the KNLS Buruburu. There is also KNLS in Nakuru. So Nakuru will be coming to you very soon. So put on your shoes, put on your jacket. This is just about to get interesting. Thank you so much. And until the next one,